Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose, and I'm back once again with another tale of horror. I'm hoping everybody's having a good week. Personally, this last week or two has been pretty rough for me. I kind of going through like a sort of ear infection type of thing, so I'm basically deaf in one ear at the moment, and I didn't know if I was going to be doing an episode this week because of it, but it's gotten better other than the fact that I really can't hear out of my left ear. So I'm recording this episode basically just using one ear. So if for whatever reason the audio quality isn't that good, I'm going to just blame that. But nonetheless, I am here with another episode for you guys. And before we get into that episode, I do want to talk about a few things. So for those of you that are in the US, and I mean probably out, like just in the world in general, it's been a hot topic. It's been an issue that, I mean, it's basically an American issue for like centuries. And that is the issue of like police misconduct, right? Or more specifically, police brutality. And if you guys are following the news, even if you're not, chances are you've seen this on social media because it's such a prolific issue. But the murder of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee, it has been a tragic case. I don't know if any of you guys listening have seen the body camera footage. If you guys haven't, I mean, I just want to give you guys a warning before you do. If you know this is the first you're hearing about it for whatever reason, be cautious when you do look that up because it is so sad and disheartening what they do to this man. Like, he's helpless and they just, you know, kind of just beating him around, taking turns doing this. Like, it very much reminded me of the Rodney King incident, and it's so sad to see something like basically like history repeating itself once again. And I mean, this is something that just happens every single day. I want to say this is something that just happens in the U.S., but obviously I can't make that generalization, so I have no idea. But nonetheless, this issue has been a very hot topic issue in the U.S. in the past couple of years. But for us, people of color, right, this has been an issue since basically our history in the U.S. We have always had to deal with this prejudice with law enforcement officials or just anybody that, you know, has been above us. And, you know, that's not to say that anybody is above people of color or anybody's above anyone, right? But knowing the history of the U.S., we know that that's just the sad reality, right? We have always been put beneath the white man and, you know, the man, the quote unquote man, right? Which we all know it's, you know, straight white men have been the ones controlling this country. But all this to say is that this issue of police brutality, it's something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I feel very passionate about, especially knowing so much about the criminal justice system and wanting to push for, you know, criminal justice reform. It's just so disheartening to see this happen every single day, even in your own community. And that puts me on to this other topic that I do want to talk about. So for one, I just want to say my condolences to Tyree Nichols and his family and any other families that have gone through this police brutality, because this is something, as sad as it is, it's an everyday thing. This is not just something that only happens every once in a while when you see it on the news. This happens every single day to people just like me and you. And that's just the sad reality. You might not see it on the news, and chances are you probably won't, right? Given everything that happens, the news wants to push these sort of like narratives, and sadly we don't see these sort of stories come out, or people just outright don't even say anything because they know nothing's going to happen, which is sad in and of itself. Again, I just want to say my condolences to Tyree Nichols and his family and anybody that has gone through this sort of thing, and anybody really like that's feeling this like effect of police brutality. I mean, we went through this a couple years ago now, right, with George Floyd and the mass protests that went on. And I know that spread all around the world. So, I mean, this issue, it's just been it's exactly that. It's been an issue in the U.S. for so long. And you would think that after, you know, its very lengthy history of just racism and police misconduct, that you would think, you know, the U.S. would learn a thing or two and try to like implement changes, but sadly that just isn't the case. And for us here in the U.S., we see this every single day. And if you're of the opinion that, oh, he deserved it or this person deserved it because of this and that, I don't even know what to say to you. I can't say anything to you because these are the type of people that just really just grind my gears. Like, there is no getting to you. You are of that mindset that it's just plain stupid. Like, I'm going to flat out say it, you're stupid. For you to think that anyone would deserve to get beat by 4 or 5 grown-ass men or shot in the back or anything in general, right? Not specific to just this case that has been going around the news, but any person of color, even any white person that has gone through police brutality, because believe it or not, the people of color are not the only ones. Police are, they're basically like just on a rampage. And I'm not here to fearmonger in any way to make it seem like this happens all the time and every place, but it's just reality. It'd be very ignorant to just ignore it. And with that, I do want to move on by saying that there is a new Hulu documentary, and for people, especially like where I'm from in the Central Valley of California, specifically in Kern County, you guys may have seen some things going around on the news or, on Twitter or social media, whatever. And if you guys are familiar with this issue of police brutality and, the Black Lives Matter movement and the organization, right? You guys are familiar with Colin Kaepernick and his protest that he did with the national anthem, taking a knee and all that, right? So he's become this major figure within like the fight for like social justice. And with that, he has gone on to create a documentary. He partnered with ABC News, and this documentary is out on Hulu, and it is called Killing County. And for those of you that you might be thinking, like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this? It's a docuseries that follows Kern County specifically, more specifically Bakersfield, right, which is a city within that county in California, which just so happens to be where Samantha and I are from, and it highlights many different cases of police brutality within this county, hence the name Killing County. And if for some of you, this is the first that you're hearing of Kern County or Bakersfield or the Central Valley in general, this place, it's a very conservative place. It's, you may think of California as this very liberal, very democratic state, which in a sense it is, when you look at the map, voting wise it is. But when you look at these like specific counties or pockets of California, the Central Valley tends to be very conservative for whatever reason that is, right? And this happens to be one of those places where, like, okay, they like in the documentary specifically, they say, oh, this Kern County or specifically Bakersfield is one of those communities that embraces the police. They back the blue, that sort of thing. And in a sense, it's true. There are, lots of people here that are very conservative. They're Republicans. They back the police, this and that, right? You get the idea. But at the same time, there's a huge population of people of color, specifically in Kern County. The majority population is Latino. And Bakersfield, that, tends to skew a little bit. Bakersfield is the biggest city within Kern County. And so, we have everything, right? It's a melting pot. But not to go on with, like, explaining the demographic of Bakersfield and Kern County. Basically, this docuseries, like I said, it follows specific cases of police brutality. And I just urge everybody to watch it, especially if you're from here. You may or may not have seen this. If you haven't, I urge you to watch it. Even if you're not from here, watch it. It highlights cases, even like I said, even though I am from here, some of these I had no idea like even occurred, and some of these will shock you. And like it just makes you think like, okay, what if these were to happen today in this era of social media where, everybody, like anything that happens, you can instantly see it the second it happens, right? You see it on Twitter, you see it on Facebook, you see it on Google, like whatever the case is. It brings a lot of questions. And it also highlights the injustices in Kern County, right? And how things basically kind of get swept under the rug and just forgotten about, where these families just have to go on and live with it. And they're traumatized, and rightfully so, because, law enforcement is supposed to be that protector, right? It's always like, oh, who are you going to call when you're in a situation? Well, you're going to call the police, right? You're not going to call your neighbor or whatever the case is. But when you have something happen to your family and that bad guy, right, or the person on the other end that caused you this like tragedy and this fear is the very people who are supposed to protect you, you're left in a state of like vulnerability. Like, what are you supposed to do at that point, And this just goes to show that like there's a reason why people don't have that trust for law enforcement in general, right? It's not just for any reason, just because they don't like them, right? There's a reason. There is always a reason for everything. And I just urge anybody interested in the topic, or, if you're just wondering like, okay, well, what are you talking about? If you're getting angry for whatever reason about what I'm saying and this and that, I urge you to watch it. Watch it and tell me what you think. There, in my opinion, there is no justification for treating any human being like that, especially on a job. Like, there is no other job where you hold so much power and when you can just outright take somebody's life and it be justified the next day. And the worst you get is like timeout, right? Basically, like we always see they get placed on administrative leave with pay. So it's just an issue that if you haven't been able to tell, I'm very passionate about, and I urge everybody to watch it and just learn more about it. So yeah, I mean, thank you guys for coming to my TED Talk. I know I went on a little bit of a rant there, but it's just something that's so important, and it's just an issue that just constantly arises in all parts of the country. And I don't want to seem like a downer or anything, for bringing this up. This is just something that has to be said. And, given the fact that I do have a platform, I have something, to put my voice out, I'm going to speak it. I'm going to speak my mind, and I'm going to say what needs to be said. But now I'd like to get on to the episode. And so for this week, I have a very special episode for you guys, and that is the Rake. During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primarily focused in rural New York State and once found in Idaho, self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book. Mariner's Log, year 1691.
He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake.
A journal entry translated from Spanish, year 1880.
I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice.
A suicide note, year 1964.
As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and I felt his presence. And once I awoke and saw his form. Once again, I awoke, heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might see the next time I awake. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye.
Bound in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope.
Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name.
From a witness, year 2006.
3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used that moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he had got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up to the end of the bed so quickly that his knees almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for about half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned about its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of emotion, the creature scrambled around to the side of the bed and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot away from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while, and it just looked at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran to the light switch, planning to stop him before he hit my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and quickly looked at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once. She said,
"He is the Rake."
My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now refer to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or any follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me.
Alright, so you all just heard the famous creepypasta, the Rake. But is this creature really real? And I know some of you might be thinking, well, obviously not, like, you just said it's a creepypasta. And I mean, yeah, you'd be right, but that being said, it doesn't mean that many people still don't believe in the Rake. Me included. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the origins of the Rake. Unlike the other creatures and spirits we've talked about in the past, the Rake actually does seem to have a traceable background. And just as all terrible things do, it traces back to 4chan. For those of you that don't know what 4chan is, first off, consider yourself lucky. But essentially, it's an anonymous image board. And if for some reason that vague ass description doesn't help you in understanding what it is, basically think of it as a place where you could anonymously post anything you want on what 4chan calls boards. And I do mean anything. Think of it as an early anonymous form of Reddit. One of the most infamous boards being the random board, or the B board. And as a result, it has been the center of controversy for many, many years. For issues such as hacking, pornography, and even murder. And I don't want to get into detail here, but if you're interested in learning about some of the craziest things that have happened on 4chan, there are a number of videos on YouTube that cover these cases, so check that out if you're interested. But with all that being said, let's get back to the story before I start going off on a tangent. Well, sometime in 2005, one user on 4chan's B board came up with a great idea.
Hey B, let's make a new monster.
And soon enough, users began throwing around ideas trying to come up with a beast so vile, it could have only came out of the deepest pits of 4chan. The group eventually decided to settle on one idea, and one user went on to create a thread based on the idea.
Alright, this is for the people who like the 3 eyes, no apparent mouth, pale skin one. Here's what we got so far. Humanoid, about 6 feet tall, but usually crouches and walks on all fours. It has very pale skin. The face is blank, as in no nose, no mouth. However, it has 3 solid green eyes. One in the middle of its forehead, and the other 2 on either side of its head, towards the back. Usually seen in front of yards and suburban areas. Usually just watches the observer, but will stand up and attack if approached. When it attacks, a mouth opens up, with a hinged skull that opens out in the chin, and it reveals many tiny but dull teeth.
This will not serve to be the final form of the creature. It went through many design changes, such as these found on the thread.
6 feet tall is good. Humanoid, pale, grayish skin, 2 large eyes on the front of the head because of the trips and nature. No nose. Mouth that is slightly visible and then opens on a hinge. Hundreds of dull but not blunt teeth. Eats meat. Genitals don't matter because no interviews really talk about that. Seen in suburban areas minding its own business. Attacks when approached, but mostly just stares at people. Looks human enough to be able to disguise with a fedora and French coat or similar. Revised again. Approximately 6 feet tall, but seen crouching. Humanoid, pale grayish skin, 2 slightly larger than human eyes. No nose. Mouth that is smaller than a human, but when provoked or attacked, opens freely on a hinge down to the neckline, showing hundreds of dull but not blunt teeth. Unknown origin, unknown diet. Seen in suburban areas. Open its mouth and widens its eyes when provoked. Attacks when approached. If not provoked or approached, just stares.
Eventually the creature morphed into what many know it as today, but the story of the Rake would not be told until July 20th, 2006. Brian Somerville, a user of the Something Awful blog, posted the story that was read at the beginning of the episode as a part of a series of stories titled Horror Theater. And now it's not known if Somerville came up with the story himself or if he got the story from another website, but the story would go on to be shared all over the internet, eventually making its way onto creepypasta.com, 4chan, and Reddit, amongst other notable sites. Soon enough, Rake mania spread and the story was everywhere. Many began to create things such as fan art and even coming up with their own Rake sightings. It had even gone as far as making the news. In 2010, a local Louisiana news station reported that a local hunter found the image of a creature on a hunting cam that had been destroyed and was shocked once he had seen what it was. Many attributed the creature with being the Rake, but in reality, the photo was actually just that of a character known as Grim from the video game Resistance 3. And now I could only imagine what people watching the news that morning were thinking when they saw that on their TV screens. Like, could you imagine all the people that were just like terrified to leave their houses after that? And I mean, I'll be sure to share that photo on our Instagram at calaveriapod, so make sure you guys check that out. But this photo is just so attached to the Rake. Like now if you search it up, like the Rake on Google or whatever, it's one of the first photos that pops up. And I know I've seen it before. Like I've seen it like on old like comedy apps like iFunny, if you guys know what that is, right? So I would always see it all the time, and it's interesting to see that like it was tied to the Rake. I didn't know that this was something that appeared on local news until I did my research. But all this is to say that the rake was essentially everywhere. And chances are, if you were into creepypastas, YouTube horror stories, or even on the internet in general in the early 2010s, you ran across a story of the rake, or at the very least, seen a supposed image of the rake. Personally, for me, I wouldn't get into those YouTube horror stories until like 2014 and 2016, when I was like in high school, and I couldn't get enough of them. You know, like those deep web horror stories, the pizza delivery horror stories, or like the Craigslist horror stories. Yeah, like those sort of stories basically, right? Well, around this time, I started to fall into like a rabbit hole of all these YouTube horror stories. And one day I stumbled upon a video of like supposedly or like allegedly true paranormal stories. And naturally, like anybody would, I clicked on it. And I would always play these stories either like late at night or whenever I was going to go to sleep or like take a nap. And I did this so that I could fall asleep to them to, you know, like end up picturing them more vividly. Like I'd be in that state where you were like half awake, half asleep, and then like my dream would basically kind of be like a movie. And you would never believe the story that came on. That's right, the rake. The story was a woman's supposed like encounter with the rake, and in it she had basically said that it killed her 2 children. And at the end of the story, she claims that the rake spoke to her and said that he would be back again. And after the story was read, the narrator began to explain basically like what the rake was, like the cryptid or the creature. And he also explained that if you were to see the rake, it either means you're gonna die or someone you know is going to die. So like similar to like the La Llorona, like her cries, right? It's just weird how like these things are always tied to these creatures, or like the banshee as well. And this just so happened to be one of those times that I played the videos to like take a nap. And at that very moment, I thought like, hey, I have to see what are they talking about? Like I have to see what this thing is, right? And I opened my eyes and immediately my heart sank. I was terrified and just left speechless. I could not believe what I was looking at. This creature, this thing that had supposedly like killed this woman's entire family, which, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't believe it, but this thing, like, this was the very thing that I saw one night in 2013, right before I was about to go to bed. So you could imagine the horror and shock that I must have been in. I immediately recognized it and relived that very moment all over again. You see, I had an encounter with this thing some years ago, but I just sat here this entire time explaining to you all about how this thing was nothing more than like a mere internet legend. So, what happened? Well, let me tell you. So like I said, this happened in 2013. At the time I was in middle school. And I've always been like a night owl, right? That's just been my thing ever since I was little. And I mean, even to this day, it's like such a bad habit, but I've never been able to break it. And it's just, I don't know, it's just been basically like who I am. But for some reason, this night I decided like, oh, I'm gonna go to sleep early. And it was like around 9 p.m. And so I was basically getting ready for bed. And at this moment, I was brushing my teeth, right? And so I'm brushing my teeth and I was looking at myself in the mirror, which I feel like it's pretty normal, right? I hope it is. I don't want to seem, weird if that isn't. But yeah, I was just staring at myself in the mirror, brushing my teeth, bend over, spit out the toothpaste, go back to brushing my teeth. And I did that a couple times. And then one time, I look up and immediately my eyes just lock onto this reflection in the mirror. And now just to explain a little bit, right? So this mirror, it's a very small mirror. It's like a little medicine cabinet mirror, right? So it's not too big. And the reflection that it shows basically like the wall behind me, like in the restroom. But it captures like a tiny glimpse of like the hallway and a room. And it just so happened to be that this room is actually my room. So it shows the entrance to my bedroom. And at this time I had a pretty big bed. And it was like pushed up against the wall, like directly like where the entrance is basically. So I guess to paint a better picture, if you were walking down this little hall into my room, as soon as you go to your right, it's my bed. So you would basically have to go in, walk into my room a little bit before you could actually kind of like, do anything in that room. Because I have a pretty small room and my bed was like the first thing there. So like you couldn't like just lay down right away or, walk into the room. You just had to keep going a little bit further and then turn right and then, lay on the bed or whatever, right? So, again, it's pushed up right against the wall. And in my reflection, you're looking at the entrance of my room. Well, in this reflection, I seen what I could only describe like a human-like creature. Like, this was not a person. Like, I can't stress that enough. This was not a person. This thing was like gray, like very, very pale skin, and like no hair, like completely hairless. Like, I always say that it looked like a naked mole rat, completely bald on top, and it just kind of looked at me, and it had like its hands wrapped around my doorway, kind of like peeking its head out as kind of, saying like peekaboo, right? Like turning its head around the corner, and it just completely, like, it just locked eyes with me. And like I mentioned, my bed is directly against the wall, and it was right there where my bed would be, but on the very bottom. And like I said, I had a very big bed, and the way this creature was positioned just didn't make sense because my bed was right there. So if I were to try to like position myself the way that this creature or this thing was positioned, I'd have like my whole body like laying in the hallway basically, because you can't put your legs underneath anything, and you'd literally have to be like pencil thin to even fit right there. Like, it made literally no sense. Like, it literally had to be pencil paper thin to even fit there and peek its head out. But this, like I said, it was like a humanoid creature because it was like human-sized proportions, the head and everything. It had very like long fingers, long arms. It was just super skinny too. Like, it just looked malnourished. And well, like I said, I was brushing my teeth. I immediately just dropped my toothbrush in the sink and I ran. I ran across the house. I ran into my mom's room, and my sister and my mom were still awake. Like I said, it was only like 9 p.m., so it wasn't too late. And they're just watching TV, just laying down together. And then they're just like staring at me like, what is wrong with you? I still remember my mom telling me like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And then I told them exactly what I saw, right? I told them I was brushing my teeth. I look in the mirror, and then I see this thing in my bed, in my room. And I just remember my mom just started laughing at me and was like, what are you talking about, right? And they're just kind of looking at me like I'm crazy. Went back to watching the movie or, the show that they were watching. And I just told them, I don't care what you guys think. I know what I saw. I am not going back to my room. And I didn't. And I am not ashamed to admit that, right? I did not go back to my room. I actually didn't go into my room for like another week. I would make my sister, who was like, 2 to 3 years younger, Samantha, right? Go into my room and get my clothes for me like the next day. Like, I vividly remember I asked her, I said, hey, I'm not going in there. That thing like freaked me out. I'm so scared. And so I made her go in there, right? And so like I said, I was in middle school at this time. I was like 13 years old. So Samantha was probably like 10 or 11. And so can you imagine that? I'm making this little 10-year-old girl go in my room, grab everything for me, get my backpack and all that. And like I said, I did that for an entire week because I was terrified to go in my room. And I thank God I never saw that thing again. Like, the fear that just like hit me at that very moment, like it hit me like a truck. Like, I have never experienced anything like that before in my life. I've never seen anything like that before in my life. Just think about that. Like, imagine you saw something in your room at night when you know nothing's supposed to be there, or it's just something you don't recognize, right? Like, obviously, I know how my family looks. I know my dad, my mom, my sister. It just didn't look like anyone. And the thing is, it didn't even look human. Like I said, it's like a humanoid, human-like creature. But it's not. It's just not. So this thing, it stuck with me, and I've told this story to hundreds of people. Like, if you know me, I've probably told you this story before. So, again, let's go back to this, right? So about 3 years later or so, right, I'm watching this video or listening to this video. I open my eyes and I see this thing. And instantly I'm like, that's what I saw. I saw this creature. I saw the Rake. And so naturally, I went around telling everybody that this thing was the Rake, the Rake, the Rake, the Rake. And it's not until now, right, where I decided, you know what, I need to tell my story. And I figured it out that, like, okay, this thing is just an internet legend, because after this happened, after I saw, this video about the Rake, I went on to, like, watch a bunch of other videos on the Rake and people who had, like, supposed Rake encounters. And there was lots of stories like mine, similar to mine, where people would report seeing, like, a grayish humanoid creature running, or doing this and that. Never once did I hear anybody say anything like that it was in their house. They mainly just seen it like in the woods or something like that, right? But I just could not understand what this thing was. And then doing my research and finding out that like this creature is not real, right? It's an internet legend that people created on 4chan and then it's spread everywhere. Like, it just makes me wonder now, right? I'm even more confused. Like, what the hell did I see? So this is why I said in the beginning that many people do believe in the Rake still, and I'm one of those people, right? I'll still continue to call it the Rake, even though I know that this is just like an internet legend, but like, how do you explain that? And I know you might be listening to this and just be like, what the hell are you talking about? But like I've said in the past, I am of the belief that if you believe in, Jesus and God and there's an almighty savior, you have to believe that there is something to counter that. And with that being said, you believe in like demons and these things. Like, if evil exists, who's to say that it won't manifest itself in different ways? And if you are, that close-minded to think that we are the only people in this universe or only things in this universe or even this world, I don't know what to tell you. This world is a strange one. As you've heard on this podcast, we've shared many stories of people with strange encounters that they can't explain. And this one I just cannot explain. So could this be a case of like an internet legend coming to life because of, kind of being manifested by everybody spreading it all over the internet, drawing different art about it and all these different things, right? They're basically personifying it, making it real. Is that the case? Or is this just some other creature that we don't know about? Because one thing is for certain, this is not an animal. I don't know how it got out of the house. I don't know how it got into my room. I don't know why it was in my bed, but it was there and I saw it and I don't know what it is. So, do with that what you will, believe me or not, but one thing is for certain, I know what I saw and I know damn well I never want to see it again. So that is my Rake story, and that is the story of the Rake. And as always, I would like to end off by thanking my sources. Thank you to creepypasta.fandom.com for the story of the Rake. And thank you to knowyourmeme.com for the web post on the Rake and its origin. So let me know what you guys think. Do you guys believe in the Rake or this sort of creature? I've heard these stories of like these gray beings that people have seen, or these, things that they can't explain. So, I'd be curious to know if anybody else has experienced anything similar to like what I explained, or if they know of anybody that has experienced anything like that. And if you have, again, let me know, please. Send it in at calaveriapod@gmail.com. And as always, if you guys have a story to tell, send it in our way as well at calaveriapod@gmail.com. But before we go, like we always do, I got something to share with you guys. And this week I have a TikTok for you guys. And this TikTok, it goes back to our Duende episode. So in this TikTok, it shows like these people surrounding a Duende, like a kind of like plushie, right? And it seems to be laying on like these pictures. And then like this girl is like kind of like getting real close, like pointing out the pictures, and like you can hear this guy telling him in Spanish, like, oh, like don't touch his pictures or whatever. And then you could see its hand just move, like kind of like in an attempt to like move the like lady's finger out the way. And they start freaking out. And they're like, no, don't touch it. Like, he doesn't want you to touch his pictures. Like, leave the pictures alone. And they just continue to talk about it. Like, okay, like, those are his pictures. And then they start pointing out that, like, the mouth is, like, kind of, like, salivating. Or, like, something is coming out of the mouth. And, like, it's weird because you kind of do see it, like, it starts to, like, glisten and stuff. And then it moves again. And they're just like freaking out. And then they like, end up kind of like, oh, like the person recording kind of like backs up a bit. And then you see that it's just like laying on like some grass or something. They're just like surrounding it. And so like, I have no idea if this duende was already there and they found it. That's why they approached it, or what the case may be, right? So, check it out on our Instagram at calaveriapod. Let us know what you guys think. And before we go, if you guys do want to support the show, feel free to leave a rating or review wherever you guys listen to podcasts. If for some reason you're listening on an app that doesn't let you leave a review or a rating or anything like that, email us, follow us on Instagram or whatever. Let us know. We're always happy to reply back to everybody. And if you do have a story to tell or something that, if you want to tell me, hey, I've also encountered the rake, feel free to email us at calaveriapod@gmail.com. And if you guys are interested in looking at these photos that we reference in the episodes, feel free to follow us at our Instagram at calaveriapod. And that's the same @ that we have for our TikTok and our Twitter as well. And I just want to end off by thanking everybody for joining us today. I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.